In the 4th century BC, news of the blacksmith's death spread across the small village of Kome, on the Greek Tenos island, like a disease. The blacksmith hadn't been well liked among the townsfolk. He was a strange and twisted man, physically. His gnarled limbs and strange features always scared the children who happened to run into him. So reviled was he among the townsfolk that he was forced to live in a lonely shack several miles down the road. But hated or not, one thing was known. The town always needed a blacksmith. One could not do without such a thing. What if invaders from the east sailed forth to the island shores on their mighty boats? The people of Kome could not be without weapons and armor, and the blacksmith, who'd done his work for the town for the past 7 decades, was superlative at that. Kome's warriors were some of the finest in all of Greece, at least as far as their equipment was concerned. It was clear that they needed a new town blacksmith, but who ever dare pick up that mantle knowing what it meant? Instead of causing strife among the people, they made a town lottery. Every healthy, able-bodied young man had to pick a piece of parchment from the bowl to see who would be taking up this important, yet hated, duty. Because being a blacksmith on the island of Tenos meant a very different thing to what it did everywhere else. When a young man was selected, he broke down in tears, begging for them to draw again, for it to be anyone but him. But the die had already been cast, and 2 of the town's sentries decided that they would march him out to the town forge personally to make sure he took up the duty. If, in the last minutes, he attempted to abscond, they would put him to the sword there and then, and there would be another draw. Someone, after all, had to be the town blacksmith here. The 2 sentries dragged him to the smithy in the hills, where he saw the light of the forge inside glowing between the pillars. He gulped and walked up, the 2 men standing and watching behind him. There was no point in running. He knew even if he had attempted, they'd fire an arrow through his legs and toss his body into the forge all the same. With a soon-to-be hanged man's dismayed calm, he walked into the forge and prepared for pain. His eyes had barely even adjusted to the dark when it happened, the only illumination in here being the fire of the forge itself. Chains shot out of the walls, squeezing his arms like metal pythons with bone-breaking force. He shrieked in terrible agony and went limp, knowing from the legends that the chains would do the rest. And now, it was time to work. What would it be worth to you to make something beautiful? What would you be willing to give up, to sacrifice? Your comfort, your standing in your community, the integrity of your very body? These are the challenging questions posed by SCP-727, known as Hephaestus's Forge. It's a smithy in the ancient Greek style, tucked away in some isolated mountains. The Foundation has managed to keep away the curious with the excuse that the area is dangerous and structurally unstable. And that's at least half true. The structure is indeed incredibly dangerous, but not because of any kind of instability. Walking into SCP-727 guarantees pain at best and death at worst. So why does the Foundation occasionally send D-Class personnel into the Forge? Because, in their eyes at least, it's worth it for what they get in return. If you were somehow able to enter this anomaly without activating it, you'd likely first get struck with the sight of the many long metal chains hanging from the walls. Once you notice that, you'd likely turn to see the tools: woodworking, stoneworking, metallurgy, sculpting, a variety of tools for seemingly every physical art, from ancient to modern. Every task under the broad umbrella of crafting could conceivably be accomplished here. And of course, in the center of it all, a glowing hot forge that has been burning away now for thousands of years on end. But if you actually realistically entered this anomaly, I can assure you that you'd be having a lot less leisurely experience than this. For anyone who steps inside the forge, the chains will seem to immediately come to life and seize them around the body and limbs. This process has been described by survivors, and trust me when I say they are very much not all survivors, as excruciatingly painful. No matter the size or strength of the person, or if they were wearing some kind of armor that was intended to protect their limbs, they would feel the pain nonetheless, and just like everyone else that the Forge selected, the experience would leave them physically disabled and disfigured. In exchange for this toll, though, The chains of the forge would work their body like an oversized marionette, moving their digits and limbs around the forge until they'd successfully crafted an incredible item. This item can be any number of things, from a supremely useful tool to a piece of clothing, with some anomalous effect to a work of art to a superlative weapon. This item will leave the forge with a temporary forger once it has been completed, and many of these items, created in the modern day, have been immediately put into use by the SCP Foundation. But of course, it gets a little more complicated than that. Only one person may ever enter the forge at one time, if they want a chance at surviving their experience, albeit disabled and in terrible pain. If multiple people enter the forge at once, the chains will only select one person to be ensnared and act as the new craftsperson. As for the others, the chains will immediately wrap around their necks and either strangle them to death in short order, or simply snap their spines. Neither is a pleasant way to go. Of course, actually surviving the experience and going on with the rest of your life isn't exactly a basket full of roses either. Obviously, you already know that you'll be disabled and disfigured by the experience. But in a cruel twist of fate, the forge also has psychological effects on you and others around you. In terms of the effects on the subject, the person, regardless of their levels of confidence and self-esteem before stepping into the forge, will be upset and disgusted by their own appearance in the aftermath. And they won't be alone in this sentiment either. Regardless of the actual severity of the disability or the nature of your friends and community before the incident, you'll be treated like a disgusting freak in the aftermath. You will be ostracized by your community, left out in the cold, so to speak. While the people around you may enjoy the fruits of your labor if the object you produced inside the forge was useful to them, they will no longer enjoy your presence. The cruel thing is, when the process begins inside the forge, you won't be allowed any sleep, food, or water until the process ends. If you happen to fall unconscious, the chains will just toss you out of the forge, and you'll still be pained, disabled, self-hating, and isolated. You just won't have anything to show for it. For all you scholars of ancient Greek mythology or fans of the Percy Jackson books, your ears likely pricked up immediately when you heard the codename for this one, Hephaestus's Forge. That's right. It takes the namesake for Hephaestus, the ancient Greek god of fire, smiths, craftsmen, metalworking, stonemasonry, and sculpture. An impressive resume, even for a god. He was the son of Hera, matriarch of the pantheon and wife of the philandering thunder god Zeus, and was cast down from Mount Olympus at birth. He's often depicted as having some kind of physical disability or deformity that he compensates for with his superlative skills at seemingly every kind of crafting. Still, despite his skills, because of his imperfections, he was still considered an outcast among the pantheon. Clearly, there are parallels here. If you step into the forge, you'll be given, for a brief period, the legendary skills of Hephaestus, but you cannot have the skills of the forge god without also understanding his pain. You'll be tortured and disfigured by the process, and forever spend the rest of your life as an outcast just like him. You will come to know exactly how lonely it is to be Hephaestus, and in that way, perhaps Hephaestus himself will be less alone. But one of the aspects of this mythic forge that the Foundation finds most interesting is some of its more long-term projects. These are larger constructions that would, in theory, take days on end to build, even with the incredible powers of the forge. The problem is, the more truly ambitious projects have always failed as a result of the subject dying from the injuries and the sheer physical strain of being a puppet of SCP-727. In these instances, the forge seems to abandon the construction forever unfinished. Even though they're not usable by the Foundation, though, doesn't mean that the Foundation didn't find them absolutely fascinating. The following are a few examples of these kinds of creations. One was a huge humanoid metal construct, standing at over 10 meters tall, with beautifully molded limbs that had a large number of articulated joints. Researchers on SCP-727 have nicknamed this construction Talos, after the mythic bronze warrior, an automaton whose only weakness was a single red vein surging down its leg. The site director was disappointed by the news of this construction falling through, as having a huge metal robot this size likely would have been an asset to the Foundation in containing larger anomalies. After being studied and researchers determining that it's inert, they decided to still put it to good use by having it stand as a statue in the site's lobby. Next was a grand chariot, crafted from an unknown metal and capable of withstanding temperatures well above 6,000 degrees Celsius. Naturally, the history nerds working on this project were quickly able to ascertain the true purpose of this chariot. It would have been a chariot for the god Helios, the god of oaths and sight. As part of his duties, he would ride a flaming chariot across the sky, dragging the sun to create the transitions between day and night. Thankfully, given that we have gravity here, this chariot not working is no great loss. There was also a fine helmet made of pure silver, covered in intricate engravings and bearing a pair of small wings. It was during the construction of the wings that the subject here unfortunately keeled over and died from the stress. We have no idea what anomalous effect the helmet would have had if it was finished, but again, our expertise in the world of ancient Greek myth comes in clutch. Clearly, this helmet was intended as a gift for Hermes, the messenger god, known as Mercury to the Romans. And hey, here's a fun fact from SCP Explained that you can share with your friends next time you see a hospital. Hermes had a famous staff called the caduceus. It's a long staff with 2 snakes curling around it and 2 wings at the top. You might have seen it used as a symbol on the side of hospitals, but that's actually wrong. What they should have been using is a plain staff with a single snake curling around it. That's the rod of Asclepius, the legendary ancient Greek healer. The caduceus would have been a better symbol for a post office, seeing as Hermes was the god of messages. Anyway, moving on. The next to the failed creations is probably the most enigmatic. It was a large piece of unknown metal that has proven to be almost completely indestructible, and the subject making it was killed as a result of having to be next to the furnace smelting it for over 65 grueling hours. Researchers have since spent weeks trying to identify the exact chemical composition of the metal. They believed that if they could reliably recreate it, it would likely be a huge asset in beefing up containment procedures for some of the Foundation's most destructive Keter-class anomalies. So far, that research has borne no fruit. But even more fruitless was the Forge's attempts to create a huge metal door and frame. The subject being forced to make it passed away while halfway through work on the extremely complex locking mechanism, one which didn't match any known human design in all of history. This is another case of a gift that seems to have no specific recipient within the Greek pantheon. But if you'll allow for crossovers with the Romans, it could serve as a tribute to Janus, the god whose name gave us January, the 2-headed god of gates, boundaries, passages, paths, and doorways. Perhaps, all things considered, it's best that this door was never finished. It's not like we had any way of knowing who or what would end up walking through it. The only other complex project that SCP-727 never finished was an exquisite clay sculpture of a woman. It seemed to us that the most likely parallel here is Galatea, a beautiful female statue created by the sculptor Pygmalion, who was then brought to life by Aphrodite, the goddess of love. And perhaps, in a sense, this clay sculpture was somehow alive too, because the second it was in a state where it accurately resembled a woman, the Forge abruptly strangled the subject it was using to sculpt her with its chains. And if this clay Galatea truly was alive, the Forge considered her unconscious, because it grabbed her with its chains and threw her out, causing her to shatter onto the ground. Talk about having an unhealthy sense of perfectionism. Now check out SCP-1730, What Happened to Site-13, the full story compilation, or Insane SCP-001 Fight, Gate Guardian vs. Scarlet King, for more.